Hey, welcome to the Social 333 podcast. My guest today is Garet McLendon. Garet.
Hey, how you doing, man? Pleasure to meet you.
Good.
Man. Pleasure to
meet
be
you.
a part of this show, man. Thanks for inviting me out.
Absolutely. Thanks for coming.
Yeah.
Tell the audience a little bit about yourself and what you got going on.
My name is Garet McLendon. You can find me on social media. Make sure you spell my name right, GaretMcLendon. I'm from California. Thanks for the invite out here to Texas. First time being out here in Dallas. I'm really enjoying it,
Cool.
And yeah, just out here, recovery, being an inspiring, doing a message of hope, from the places I've been and what I accomplished in life and what I still have yet to accomplish, and just sort of, just moving through the wakes of, of life,
Yeah, talk a little bit about your journey, because I saw it on Instagram and I was like, wow, this is pretty crazy. And
Nice.
then, like, I know there's probably some people out there that we had some folks on that are like Christian Brotherhood and stuff like that. People that I had one guy that was in jail and like he went to jail as a very young person and then ended up getting out. And we heard kind of his story. Like yours is more on like the addiction side of it and getting caught up in like the streets a little bit. Talk a little bit about that because I know some people probably got stuck the same way.
Yeah. I mean, for anybody who's out there who, suffering from addiction or maybe your family members are suffering from addiction, please get a hold of me on my social media, man. Maybe there's, a way I could help, I gotta say that to me it was more like it was just a normal life. I grew up with addict parents, alcoholic and addict parents, and I just grew up into this lifestyle that I didn't know no other thing. And and by the time I was of an age, I stopped going to school. I stopped playing sports. I stopped any and everything that was probably any positive influence in my life, and I went straight to the streets, and I know you become who you hang out with. I started hanging out with guys who were, from in and out of prison, and gang members, and ran these streets, and then until one day, it seems like there was always this cycle out there of people and it just one day you're, the next thing you know, you're 13 years old on the streets running around, and the next thing you know, you're 18, 19 years old, and it's like it's your turn to be up to bat, and you're out there running these streets, and you're doing all those things that those people were doing before you, and the life, and the life I led, and the ways I was living my life just led me to the place I sort of knew I was going to go, and that was prison, And I got a ticket, at a very young age. By the time I was 21 years old, I was I was out there, and 22 years old, jail at 20, 21, and in prison at 22, and ended up on a level 4 yard, and I wasn't scared. Like I wasn't frightened or scared or like, oh my God, what happened? Like I loved it. I felt like I arrived in life. I felt like I really, like everything that I've been up to this point in my life, like I arrived in this place. I wanted to be there. I wanted that name. I wanted people to know that I come from this, from this prison yard, or I've been there, So it sort of like gave you like an honor, or like it gave you like some stripes for out there on the streets, and then and the stuff you see, like everything that you talk. I mean, everything they talk about, or maybe you see in movies or anything like that. It's there's similarities, but it definitely like you see people stabbed. You see riots happening and people getting shot. You're fighting for your life. You're praying to a God sometimes by yourself, even though you're telling the people around you not to believe in them. Like it's just like it's sometimes like it's really cool, and this brotherhood, and you got a group of guys, and it's sort of like you're laughing, and the next minute you're fighting for your life because a riot or a dope dead or something in the yard is not applicable. And what happened for me is I just got caught up in that lifestyle. I got caught up in that lifestyle to where anything else that was in my life was non-existent or important to me, and I was in jail and prison was the only time I was ever clean, like ever sober to a point. But when I'm gonna tell you, like I felt like I was anything but, I felt like I was anything but free every time I paroled from prison. Wow. They talk about this freedom, and they used to give you like, there's like these things, like and all these certain things, like you write your name on the wall, you're bound to come back. We make these bird cages with little birds out of tissue paper and stuff like that to release the, this bird when you get out. Like, and I tried, it seems like I tried all this stuff I was testing and tried, man, and none of it worked, man. Cause the one thing that would happen is like, I might be able to I might be able to like stop drinking and using for this time being, while I'm busted and stuff like that. Like the urge, like I'm away from this, I'm away from all that stuff that was going on the streets, and I have to keep like this level head when I'm inside jail and stuff like this, but I gotta say, like I hit S time, which was like 2 weeks, 14 days to the house, 10 days, and something would happen. Like I knew, like, man, I didn't have the willpower or anything like that to not drink and use when I got out.
Wow.
And as soon as I got out, man, I felt like I was able to, because I was trapped in this mind body, this thing to where I like, boom, I drank, man. I get off. As soon as the first thing I do, man, is I go to the nearest liquor store and I get me a 40, a 22, or whatever I could get, and I take a big old swig. And by the time I got back to my hometown, man, I was shooting drugs into my system,
Wow.
and it was just a matter of I went back to the only thing I knew, the same places, the same people, the same streets, and it was like the streets never changed, just the people around it did, it'd be maybe, and so like, and I was just caught up in this, and I love it, and I was in that cycle. Like I last out there anywhere from 14 days to 45 days. The longest I was out in the 15-year stretch is I was out for 5 months.
Wow.
And like I was just caught viciously in this, like, I really think, like, man, I thought maybe it was, I knew it was drugs. I knew drugs was a problem, so I really think I could drink. And I get out and I take that drink, and then I start feeling, and maybe one day, the first couple nights or something like that, I'd be able to be, yeah, I can drink. But then like one day or night or one weekend, I know I'd be drinking, and like I drink too much, and it just take me out, man. I go from one thing, I want to go for something feeling really low to something to make me go really fast, and then wherever that balance is in there, like I was always looking for that balance of that middle ground of that, that low and high, and man, I destroyed my life for the next 20 years.
Wow.
Homeless junkie on the streets, trap houses, stealing cars, like, maybe I felt like I was at home and all that stuff when I was in the system, but I really felt like I was apart from everything when I was on the streets. I had it backwards, like I could live and maintain and have a routine inside the prison system, and people tell me when to eat, when to work, I work out, I knew where, I had a place to sleep, I knew to take showers, and like, like you sort of had like this, but when I was out there on the streets, I didn't have that, that sense of security or any of that, man. And I just, and like it just get worse and worse and never better, and it didn't matter. Like I had a daughter or the family or the kids, or even if I got a job, because all that stuff, man, would just be like stuff I would have. And I would, I'd be wobbling this fence of trying to do good, but just couldn't stop doing bad. Like I couldn't stop, like I really try, but like I always fell off into the wrong side of the fence. And I always went off into this the lifestyle I knew and I wanted. I really like felt like I couldn't function unless I had a drink, hit, or fix inside my system. And it was once I had that in my system, then I felt like I can deal with life. Then I felt like, oh, I need to take care of these 168 traffic tickets I got, or I think I really need to go see my daughter now. Like, and then I feel like I gotta, like I've been up for a couple of days, and I felt like my drug use is like level, and like now I need to go try to mend this relationship with my daughter and spend some time with her, and it was nothing but broken promises, and I used with my mom. So I go out there and I, and I find my way to my mom's house, and trying to get her some groceries or whatever it is that, she may need, or a ride to the store or to the laundromat or something like that. But, and I get high with her, and I'm in a society, man.
Wow.
Yeah. And like I said, it was worse, never better, man. And I went to a couple different treatment centers, and I tried this program, and then it all led up to on November 14th of 2013. I had track marks from my ankles up to my neck and down my arms. By this time, I couldn't stop slamming heroin and speed. And by that, I couldn't stop, staying out of jail. Like I really feel that jail and prison like rescued me more than it did anything. Like it really, if I would have stayed on the streets longer than I did, I would have died out there with a needle in my arm, or because of some, maybe a hot shot or something like that. Because and so I get picked up and arrested. Like, as time, like the crimes were petty after a while. I mean, I got one big controlling case, but then like it was just like I was caught in this vicious cycle of absconding on parole, or they find, I was on a high control parole, so they find a knife, or they find something stupid in the vicinity of me, or I'd be at the wrong place at the wrong time, and somebody else would have something. They would line 10 people up on the curb, and I knew for a fact, man, I'd be the one. I'm like, yeah, you're going to jail, like we'll let everybody else go, but you're going, because we know you're up to no good,
Wow.
And I just, and so on that, on February 14th, I was in this little bit of getting shot at by some, enemies on the street type thing, and then later that night, I was just, trying to plan out this revenge, and I've been out for maybe like 35 days, 40 something days at this time. And like I used to be like, damn, I just really need to get some sleep. I'd be trying to plan going to sleep, and on Valentine's Day that night, man, they I left the liquor store with a bottle, and I walked across the street to this trap house I was staying in the back of, and I sort of was cleaning up, getting high, and getting ready to go out and seek revenge. And man, and the cops hit, they came and they raided that place, and they got me. They saw me walking from that liquor store to that house, and they got me, and I was arrested one more time, and and I went into the county jail, and like in there, like I know how to program. I'm not like it. I know what to expect. I know, like it's, if I could just beg if I just sit there, and when I get to the substation and be like, man, can you give me 24 hours, before I go down on this journey, 24 hours before I go to the county jail, to the booking, and just sleep, let me sleep for 24 hours, rest for 24 hours, and I go to booking, and I go in the county jail, and it'd be a lot of the people I know, and the people I hung out with, and I'd be in that little parade, and I get, I eat Happy Cars, I drink hand sanitizer with Top ramen packs on it. I did anything to change the way, just anything to feel, Right. I just wanted to be numb.
Right.
I don't want to show emotions in anything in my life. And so I went through this, and on March 17th, which is my sobriety date, March 17th, 2013, I haven't had nothing in the meantime that affected me. I don't have nothing for the past, 12 years. I have, and however many months, I haven't had nothing to affect me from the neck up.
Wow.
Yeah, and thank you, and I got involved in recovery, and I got involved, and I really got involved with just, learning how to live a new life, trying to be a member of society, trying something different out, and so,
something new. Yeah.
Like, something new.
So you were just never really exposed to like normal life. You just always thought, the drug scene was just like
a normal life. Yeah. That was my normal life.
That's wild.
Yeah.
Talk about, because I was a bad kid. Like I went through.
You were a bad kid? No, come on, man. Yeah. I was a bad kid.
But yeah, I mean, you're obviously.
We would have hung out.
Yeah, like so. I was a good kid, and then I got into high school, and I found out that there was like a juvie program. And kids that went to like juvie hall, they all went to like this special school for
youth authority and juvenile halls and stuff.
Kids that like were just kind of misfits, and it was all just kids that were my age that like going through divorce, or their parents were users, or like they just grew up in a bad household. And I was like, oh, this is kind of cool. And I kind of like went down that rabbit hole. I was never really into like the addiction and the drugs part of it, but they were. And I was always like kind of in the scene. And I would end up getting caught up in some of their stuff because I was just there, and I was like, man, like this is rough. But I never got to the point where you were, which I think is a really profound thing for like a lot of the viewers, because they may be in a cycle like you're in a cycle.
Mm-hmm.
Talk about like the prison stuff, because I saw that you had some stuff on there, and we had a guy that was on here on the show, and he was like, "Yeah, it's exactly what it is. Like everything that you see in TV, where you have to prove yourself, where there's just drugs running
I'm a
around, stuff
very
like that."
large man, and I was I'm tall, and I was young, and I mean, like, I might have came in sucked up and all this stuff, but like I get these jobs in the kitchen, and I work out every day, and like I remember on my first term I went into prison, and I probably was like 175 pounds. I looked like a praying mantis, I mean, I was bad, the disease had me out there,
Right.
and all of a sudden I disappear for a couple years, and I go in and on this first, in the first couple terms, like I didn't drink no Pruno, I just smoked cigarettes, and I drank coffee, and I worked out, and I worked in the kitchen, and I just ate everything, and I just drove, man, and I came out, man, and I went from like 175, then I came out like 275.
Wow.
And I didn't know, to this day, man, like I don't know how big I am. Like I don't know that, like I'm so big, and then I see pictures of me, like, like, damn, I'm huge, like maybe when I'm sitting to somebody, or I get into a smaller car, or I go to a restaurant and they have like an arched doorway or something like that, like all this stuff. Like I don't pay attention to all this stuff, but like I was huge, and me being a bigger, and so when and people gravitate to that in prison, and then so like they this bigger guy, so like I go into these places, and this bigger guy me would come in, and these guys would just gravitate towards me, and I always felt like I had to keep a level head, and do all this stuff. And I'm gonna tell you, like my biggest thing, like what this is how small-minded I was. Is I just wanted to sell drugs in the prison system. I wanted to know how I could live this lifestyle I was living out in the streets, how I was, hustling drugs and doing all this stuff. How I want to be able to bring that into prison. That was my goal in life.
Wow.
Like I just wanted to be able to get to a yard, but I want my points to get down, and I want to get down to a minimum yard so I can manipulate the system to be able to, because people were, guys would talk about it, like, I mean, guys were talking about how they did it and all this stuff, and I'm gonna tell you, like, man, my points, came down after 7 to 8 years of doing time in and out, violations, this and that, new case, all your points, like they start dropping down, and I'm not getting in trouble, because I'm not, and I made it down to this minimum yard. I got a hard 19. I can't get no gate pass, but I just loved it. And I remember, man, like it was for me, like I was just like, man, like this opportunity came where I was able to bring, by this time it was like tobacco, marijuana, and some speed up into the system, and I did it multiple times. And I'm gonna tell you, like I felt like I arrived, I felt like I was finally getting over on the system. Here I am, and like just being able to like to watch and see all that, you watch everything around, and just to make it happen, it felt like I really got over on CDC or something, and all this stuff. I mean, in prison, it's scary at times. There's, like there's time, like solitary confinement was, I like it, man. Like solitary confinement, when you're locked up for a year at a time, and solitary confinement, like you knew, like it was just working out, reading the Bible, or reading a book, or, and just like, playing chess with a string, or pinochle to the bar, like that, it was good. But then you get into like the, general population, and all this stuff, and you got drama, and you got all this stuff, and people, disciplining people, and fights or riots and all this stuff breaking off, and and there's times like when riots would break off in a small little 180 chow hall, and you watch, like you never forget the sound of that gun. At night, like early in the morning, they check the net of them cocking that gun, man. You always, like, it's something like to this day, like the shutting of the cell door, or the cocking of the gun, the footprints on the floor, or like all, like the flushing of the toilet, like none of that stuff ever, like it takes time, like still to this day, like I just resonate with it, when I hear it, and it brings back the memories and stuff like that, and and I watch people get sliced up, man, with razors. I watch people get stabbed with knives on the way to chow. I watch guys, I watched like a whole get together of guys getting their head smashed in with a brown coffee cup mug, with a brown coffee cup, and I'm I just, I watched people get shot inside that chow hall, with a bullet, warning shots fired, and down and back up, and and you just sort of, like I didn't think nothing of it. I don't know. I was just like, man, like it's like, like you're a soldier in there, and I'm young, and I just felt like I was a soldier, and it felt like, just like, you just go at it. And if that something like that happens, I mean, sure, I've been hogtied and drug off the yard, thrown into a cage, pepper sprayed, a few times, rinsed off, and just burn your whole body's burning, butt naked in this little dog, the little bird cage they call it, and like those are just like, and I don't know, like I said, that was just like normal. That was just like, that's just the way it is in there. That's just the way it is, and so like it just, it just felt like, it just felt like I like I said, I didn't know no other way of life. I felt like I was really at home in there. I really felt like if I could, like nowadays that like of like I think about it, and I think about like I got to stay positive, and what positive could I bring out of that? Prison taught me about routine. Prison taught me about this routine and really to this day, like now that I'm out, I'm living on the other side of the walls, and I'm like I'm got a good life going. Like I have a routine, and I remember there was times when I was on that yard, and I get woke up at 3:30. They pop the door at like 3:45, 4 a.m. A guard would grab me, take me to work exchange, take me into the kitchen to my job. I do my job. I get off my job. I like come back to my cell. I take a nap. I work out. I go to dinner. And then I go outside. Maybe I work out again. I walk the yard. We walk laps around the yard, just talking and talking. It didn't matter about the weather. It didn't matter if it was, depending on how bad the rain was, depending on how bad the snow was. But you just go out there and you just walk in this circle around the yard, right? And and guys were with you, and we all just sit there, and now, but you're in this routine, and having that routine in there is what made time just fly by. It just like your mind, like you knew exactly, like you knew laundry was on Thursday, you knew pancakes were on Friday, you knew the breakfast on Sunday, you just knew that your workout, that you're gonna work out 6 days a week, the 1 day of rest, you just had handball all day on this, and like that continuous, that routine of life, man, it just helped. And out here in the real world, I got a routine, man. I wake up, and I got this routine of prayer, meditation, and exercise in the morning. I got this routine of I get up, I take my son to school, I get to go to work, I get off work, I take care of my son, I cook dinner, but like I got this routine, man. I never thought routine was important in anywhere. Like I didn't know that's what it was. I just thought that was like, oh, I'm doing time. Right. I'm doing time, or like I'm doing hard time now because now my routine is all 23 hours a day in this cell. I get maybe every other day I get 30 minutes to take a shower. You know what I'm saying? But even in scenarios, like I had a routine, and whether I was reading a book, I work out for 2.5 hours to 3 hours a day, and the first thing in the morning, I bird bath in my sink. I roll up your mattress and put everything, write letters, whatever it was, man. Like it was just all routine, man. It was whatever it is to not think about out there.
Right.
Routines. I think routines are very important in life, man.
Tell me, what was the turning point? Like, what happened that you were like, okay, like, I've had enough. Like I'm not going back. I'm not.
I never thought I was. I mean, like I said, I was more or less like, this is going to be my way of life. I ain't gonna. I'm not. I'm gonna end up doing a lot of time. That was just like how I thought my life was going to end up like that. And I might have been tired of. And I was deep down. I was tired way before I ever stopped. I was sick and tired of the cycle. I was sick and tired of getting arrested. I was sick and tired of coming out. Like I could maybe get, this little, I have my daughters, getting older, and like, and the time with her is getting less, and like, and I just know that like I was tired, man. Like I was I just remember sitting there and I was at this treatment center, and I had to go to this first treatment center I went to, and I did the program, and I was sober, but I had a lot of baggage, I had a lot of arrest, and I had all this stuff, wreckage of my past I had to clean up, and I went from that, I went from that treatment center, and I went to a court date, that I had to go and turn myself in. Like I didn't know I was going to get turned. I thought maybe since I was in a treatment facility and I was following instructions from my parole and doing all this stuff, I thought maybe they let me slide, But I walked into the first time ever in my life. I walked into my hometown courthouse, and I walked through the front doors, and I sat in the seat, and I was dressed nice, and and I had some paperwork stating that I'm changed, rehabilitation type stuff, and parole. I checked into all my parole. I graduated this program. I had letters from the mayor of Pomona, saying that I was, volunteering in the community, and, as an asset and all this stuff. And he took all that stuff, man. He looked at me and he just put that aside. He said, like, people like you don't change, you're a threat to our society. People like you don't change. You're a menace to society. It's I'm not, I have no sympathy towards you, You get what you deserve type thing. And it was the very first time I was ever arrested sober and clean and sober, 100%. I only had like 6 months, of nothing affected me from the neck up. And I walked into, it was the first time I ever went through, I got reprimanded right there in the front in the courthouse, and I got arrested, and I went to this holding tank, and before, and the court, you go through the doors, and the bailiff or whatever, the guy sticks you in this little room before you transfer downstairs. And I remember it was like the first time, man, like I deep down, like I sat there on this concrete bench, and I was just like, man, I'm so tired of this. I was just so tired. It was like the first time I ever had like a true reflection on my life and the direction it was going. And there was nobody, because nobody could do nothing, man. There was nothing the only person that could change the dynamics of my life was me, man. Right. And it was like the first time I ever feel like, damn, I have to do something different, And I'm gonna tell you, I went out there when I went into jail, and I'm gonna tell you, I went into this county jail, and I was doing some county time, and I'm gonna tell you, like when I got out, man, even though that thought and everything, when I sat there and I did like some self-reflection of where my life was gonna be, and how much I wanted to change. When I got out right there, man, I went out. That time I got out, I was out for 6 days of jail, 6 days. And I was right back, man, on some charges and looking at some time, and for nothing crazy, man. Like for some petty, man. A cop reached in, to this backpack that I had, and he stabbed himself with one of these syringes I had inside the backpack. Oh, wow. And it was assault on an officer. And I'm gonna tell you, it was one of my worst experiences I have ever experienced in my life, of getting arrested, and this good cop, bad cop would take me around, and like my time at the substation, my time in the county, like the dungeon, like it was horrible, man. It was just like and there's nothing, and you're just going, like, I'm sleeping on the tables and and it was just bad, and and I got back out from that, and I went full-fledged, and I went full-fledged into my disease, and that was led up to that February 14th date, and then I think on March 17th was March 17th of 2013, when I arrived at that other treatment facility, was the day that I really made that decision. There was nobody else making it for me. It wasn't my circumstances of the choices I have. It wasn't the circumstances I put myself into, or the choice. It was like Garet finally made a choice to, like, I really deep down wanted something different for my life. I truly was just sick and tired of living this life that I was living, man. Like I was just so done, man. Like, wow. And And honestly, like really, I thought, man, like I wasn't like I planned this date or wanted that date and up all the way up into there too. Like I was thinking about, I was leaving, I don't leave. Like I was just looking at this as a get out of jail free card as they took me to this next, this facility. I was just like, where am I and who can I get a hold of? And I'm leaving,
Right.
like I'm not staying here. But this guy that I knew from the streets that I ran with, and I did time with, and I've been on the streets with and all this stuff, man. This guy came up to me, man, and he gave me this hug, and he was just like, man, brother, I hope you stay. And he didn't give me like one of those hugs, like, like a shoulder hug. He gave me a hug, like something, man, that just something that resonated, like this guy really cared for me. And maybe my whole life, maybe it was just like really, I thought that nobody ever cared for me, man.
Right.
And I went out there and I really thought I'd go out there and I just thought, man, I'd be better off if I was just dead and out of these people's lives that anybody, because nobody cares for me. But the main thing is I didn't care about myself. I didn't have no love or relations. I didn't have like nothing with myself, and I couldn't, if I don't have it, then there's no way for me to show it to anybody else.
Right.
And this guy, man, he gave me this big old hug, and I went into this office and I made that decision, and I never backed off from that decision. To this day, I am fully ingrained into a life of recovery, and it's, and it just keeps like, this, I keep on just like living in just this life of recovery. I didn't have no life when I got here. I didn't have a life, dude. Like I didn't have nothing considered life. I didn't have like I was doing fraud on my own account, so I couldn't have a bank account. Like I literally, when the time came and I got my second paycheck from this job, and I went to the bank thinking that I can open an account, they were like, man, you owe us money. Wow. Your transactions, like you can never, like for the next couple of years, we'll give you another chance, but you're going to pay the money you owe. You're going to, every transaction that you do has to be from inside of a window. Wow. You do not get no ATM or no debit cards or nothing like that. Wow. Like you can, but we'll and I literally built from that. Wow. And I was 33 years old and I never had a driver's license. I had 168 traffic tickets. I've been in 16 car accidents. I lost more cars than people own in a lifetime. And even as I was getting sober, man, like the overwhelming, that's like they put all this, like all these tickets, and I had these DUI classes and Caltrans and community service, and I had like I was mentally, like when they pulled me up on the DMV computer, they thought I was like literally like retarded. Like I literally, like I had to go. I remember the time I got pulled over, man. I had a palm size bag of dope, man, and I was getting pulled over, and I just ate it, man. Wow. And I know it busted open, and you can taste it all, and I just remember the cops, doing that DUI checkpoint, and I just feel, all of a sudden, you just feel like I felt the hair and the goosebumps, and that the hair on I couldn't talk, and I just felt like every word I'm saying, I'm stuttering, and like the hair on my body was just standing up, and I get to that point to where I'm just like, just take me to jail. Just take me. I don't care. And I couldn't wait to get to that cell so I could try throwing up the bag I just ate, it's overwhelming. They told me like I had to do like all this stuff, man, just to get a driver's license, and I wasn't there. My positive outlook on life, like when someone gives me like this plate full of stuff, like just to get a driver's license, man, it was overwhelming. Mm-hmm. That you have to do this. You know what I thought, man? I just thought I better buy a nice car so I don't get pulled over. I thought that you know what, maybe I'll never have a driver's license. Right. Maybe I thought there was no way possible for me, because I looked at the picture, but my perception was wrong. I thought I had to do everything at one time. Oh. And then someone told me, he's like, why don't you just pick out one thing at a time? What's that one thing that you can do right now that and it gets you into like this, setting these goals and this mind. And I started with what I could do at that time, and it just worked in it. And I was able to start my Caltrans work. And for the next year and a half, dude, I worked I picked up trash off the freeway, planted ice plants, cleaned up all these, and it was like and that was just all it did, man. And then from there, I started working this little job, and I had these DUI classes, and I'm gonna tell you, you show up when you're sober, clean and sober, and not drinking and stuff, like those classes are a breeze, dude. I actually show up. I'm on time. I have money to pay for the class. I'm not nodding out in the class. And I used to go there, and I show up to 1 or 2 just to make an effort. And I used to fall. That the teacher would wake me up at the end of the class and be like, "Hey, dude, it's over, man. Try staying awake." I would just be out, dude. Like I literally, and it didn't matter how much drugs I did before I went into this class. Like I'd be like, I gotta stay up, man. I shoot a big shot. I smoke it until I smoke all the way there, and then I get in the class and I sit there and I go to the bathroom like 10 times, like water on my face. And I sit up against the wall and I just pass out, man. Man, I was able to do these classes, and be on time and take care of all that stuff, man. And at the, and 2 years after, and the number one main thing I did is that I didn't drive until I had a license. Wow. I made a commitment, man, that I for sure don't need another driving with no license ticket, right. And it ain't gonna help me getting one of these tickets without having a license, So it took me 2 years to be, and at the age of 35, I finally got a driver's license. I had to get the breathalyzer, and I got all this stuff, and I bought me this $400 beat up Blazer that was wrapped around a telephone pole, and I was so, but like the thing is I was so excited and happy to have gotten this car, like this like to some people, like, oh my God, you're driving. I had no air, no heater, like none of the windows, like the windows you had to pull up and wedge, like it but it started up and it went. Nice. I don't think no gauges ever worked on it and stuff, but for a person like me, man, that was the first car I ever bought in my life for myself.
Nice.
That I had a key, not a screwdriver to start.
Wow.
And it just and the small things like that, man, add up over time, man. And it it makes you really worth it. Like I never felt so grateful to being able to drive. Damn, I got a driver's license, and I got some insurance, and I did this stuff, man, and it sort of like just keeps you going, man, in life,
Well, so someone in your shoes, I'm sure, like at some point, lost hope, right?
Mm-hmm.
I'm sure you're just like, you know what, like the hell with it. This is what life is gonna throw at me. And like, let's just roll, right? What can you tell someone that may be in the same spot? They're like, hey, look, like, this is all I know. The streets love me. I love the streets. Prison's like my getaway or whatever.
For the person who is just like me, who is out there, who it doesn't matter what anybody ever tells. I know this, that it doesn't matter how much time I do, or any consequences I face, but when you get tired of living the way you are, just know that for some of us that it's for a guy like me, it's better that I came in with like destroying burning every bridge and to not have it like that. I destroyed to rebuild from utterly scratch, but for the guy who's out there who is who's suffering and who thinks he can't get out of the hole he's in, that I offer you help, man. That I hope that my main purpose of doing all these podcasts is this someone to be in, is this to inspire people, to let you know that you could always reach out to me and I will guide you in any way form I can, to let you know it's possible for you to recover. It's possible. I mean, like it is, no matter how far down the scale you have gone, that there is a way out. And but I'm gonna tell you one thing, that you can't do it yourself. That I many times I thought that I can, but I can't. I countless vain attempts, dude, of me trying, but I can't, man. I always like to say this, is that and for that guy who's or for anybody who's in there, or for that guy who's out there who's struggling so hard, who thinks that, man, like I don't want to live, or I don't want to do that. Like, I get it. I was there, man. I thought the world would be a better off place if I was dead. And if you're still alive, you know, like we need people like you. We need the people who've been out there that do the ringer and been in the hardest, you know, the most terrifying and the hardest trials of their life and have survived. Because you are the, you know, you think that you are nothing, but like, man, if you can come over to this side and use those stories to inspire other people, to let them know that like, you know, like we need people like that to stay in the program. We need people like that to come over to this side and let people know that, man, that there's a way out, man. There is a way out, you know.
Garet, if somebody was interested in learning more about your podcast or what you got going on, or just needs, you know, somebody to talk to, where would they go?
I mean, I'm not shy in any way, form. Garet McLendon, man, Garet, McLendon, McLendon. You know, check out, you know, on my IG or Facebook or Mindset Recovery. You know, if anybody who's out there who thinks they may need help or wants help, or think, you know, are sick and tired of living the way they are living, you know, I got a connection, you know, or maybe I can be of a service to you, you know.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Garet, appreciate you coming on the show.
Thank you so much for having me.
Awesome.
Man.
Thank you.
Thank you.